Rishi Sunak has won the race to be leader of the Conservative Party and will become Britain's next Prime Minister, the third this year. The former Treasury chief will be Britain's first leader of colour and faces the task of stabilising the party and country at a time of economic and political turbulence. His only rival, Penny Mordaunt, conceded and withdrew on Monday. As leader of the governing party, he will take over as Prime Minister from Liz Truss, who quit last week after just 45 tumultuous days in office.
Good afternoon. As returning officer in the leadership election, I can confirm that we have received one valid nomination. Rishi Sunak is therefore elected as leader of the Conservative Party. You may wish to know the new leader of the party will address us in this room at 2:30.
All right, well, for the very latest, we can cross live to Westminster and speak to Arise chief correspondent John Cookson. John, good afternoon. So, Rishi Sunak, the new Prime Minister, how close a race was it, John?
Hey, Rotus, good to see you. Well, until yesterday, it was quite a close race. We had Boris Johnson in play, Penny Mordaunt, and of course, Rishi Sunak. Then Johnson, Bojo, dropped out. He realised he wasn't in with a prayer and decided he wasn't going to run this time, which left Penny Mordaunt and Rishi Sunak. Mordaunt, although popular in some elements of the party, she just couldn't get the 100 votes that were needed to get her across the threshold, and 5 minutes to deadline, which was 2 o'clock London and Nigeria time, she dropped out and she wished Sunak all the best. So Sunak went through, we think, with 200 votes altogether from MPs. He'll now meet with Liz Truss in the coming hours, and they'll decide what the process will follow next. Truss has to resign formally to the King, King Charles. King Charles today was in Sandringham in Norfolk, quite a distance from London. He's now heading back to London, and it's thought that Liz Truss will meet him tonight. When she's resigned, then the King will invite Rishi Sunak to form a government, and that's when he of course says yes and officially becomes Prime Minister, and a transfer of power takes place. Now, the sense here in Westminster is that this will happen tonight. It may be later, after 6, 7 o'clock, something like that, but it may well be pushed to tomorrow, just for logistics' sake. Rishi Sunak, one of the youngest ever British Prime Ministers, 42 years old, background in banking, a former banker with Goldman Sachs, comes from a hugely wealthy background, in as much as his wife is a billionaire. She's the daughter of a tech giant in India. Her father is a tech giant, a boss of a tech giant in India. He has his own private wealth. He's seen as a steady influence on the markets, and indeed the pound is doing very well this afternoon, as is the FTSE index, which I'm sure you'll be talking to with our colleague Mr. Bodie very shortly. But a great feeling of relief, I think, generally for the British public, saying thank God it's all over, and it's all happened so very, very quickly. And indeed, the Tories have moved quickly on this. They've sensed that the nation wants things to be settled very quickly, because, my goodness me, there's so many big things in Rishi Sunak's in tray, not least galloping inflation, the cost of living crisis, the war in Ukraine, and strikes by various groups across the country. And he really needs to calm things down, to settle things down. And in a few days from now, we'll be having a new budget from Chancellor Jeremy Hunt. So a lot happening here in Westminster at the moment, very dynamic, very fluid situation. But the big story, of course, is that Rishi Sunak is now the leader of the Conservative Party, and very shortly will become Britain's next Prime Minister.
Well, what a roller coaster. I mean, we spoke last week when we thought this decision would come on Friday, and here it is coming on Monday. So what happens next? When will he enter number 10?
There has to be this meeting with Liz Truss, and the shouting you can hear is an anti-Conservative protest. You might be able to hear a man with a megaphone trying to shout over me. He has to have this meeting with Liz Truss first, and they will exchange ideas and letters, and there'll be a general handover of the Prime Minister's office. But the transfer of power comes when Rishi Sunak is asked to form a government by the King. After that, I'm sure he will want to hold a cabinet meeting very, very quickly to get things moving, because, as I said before, Britain needs some stability, needs some easing of the various economic crises that the country is dealing with at this moment.
John,
and it will be very interesting to see how he tries to unite the party. Rogers.
Okay, thanks, John.
He has to have...
Sorry to interrupt. We got to go to Rishi Sunak right now. He's speaking right now. Let's go to him now.
Both at home and abroad. I am humbled and honoured to have the support of my parliamentary colleagues and to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. It is the greatest privilege of my life to be able to serve the party I love and give back to the country I owe so much to. The United Kingdom is a great country, but there is no doubt we face a profound economic challenge. We now need stability and unity, and I will make it my utmost priority to bring our party and our country together, because that is the only way we will overcome the challenges we face and build a better, more prosperous future for our children and our grandchildren. I pledge that I will serve you with integrity and humility, and I will work day in, day out to deliver for the British people.
As the new leader of the Conservative Party, Rishi Sunak, of course, obviously the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, speaking as a unifier and talking about the big challenges facing the United Kingdom and how it's a great country, and he is honored to serve the country that he loves as the next leader of the Conservative Party. And there's a whole lot of work to do. Let's go back to Westminster, where we have John Cookson still standing by, our chief correspondent. John, sorry about that. I have to quickly jump to Sunak. So you mentioned a protester, an anti-conservative protester that was yelling while you were talking with the megaphone, which brings me to my next question. What reaction from opposition parties? Since whoever that protester was, he's clearly with the opposition. What about them? Labour?
We haven't heard from Sir Keir Starmer directly so far, but Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner, says, how could he possibly become MP without saying a word about his policies? And, you know, that is a fair point, although Sunak supporters and Sunak himself would no doubt say that he's acting on a mandate of that was put forward by the Conservatives in 2019 that brought them a massive landslide win. And Rayner goes on to say, well, no one's voted for Sunak. And she's right. I mean, no one other than Conservative MPs have voted. But the fact is that the Tories, the Conservatives, won the election in 2019 and are governing under that mandate. Other opposition parties, the Scottish Nationalist Party, Ian Blackford, says there should be a general election, and we'll talk about that perhaps in a moment. And Sir Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, says that Sunak is yet another out-of-touch politician, another out-of-touch Tory. As for a general election, Rogers, I don't think it's going to happen. It's okay for the opposition parties to talk about a general election, and there are many people in this country who would like to see a general election. But the government in power at the moment has an 80-seat majority and is able to govern legitimately until 2024. Now, the reason why the Conservatives won't call a general election at the moment is that there's a job to be done, first of all, to stabilise the economy and get the British economy on the right track. That's going to take weeks, months. And the other reason is that if the Conservatives called an election for tomorrow or next week, they're going to lose it because Labour are 32 points ahead in the opinion polls. So it's not within the gift of the opposition parties to call a general election. That lays with the Prime Minister, and as he's just taken office, Rishi Sunak is unlikely to do that, especially as the Conservatives are almost certain to lose a general election.
John, final question. Any word at all from Boris Johnson?
I'm sorry, Rotus, you'll have to repeat.
Any word from Boris Johnson?
Oh, Bojo, you mean?
Yes.
Well, we haven't seen him since he made that dramatic return from holiday in the Caribbean on Saturday, and there was that grainy photograph of him phone bashing, trying to get support for his candidature in front of a Union Jack in some office somewhere. He's been very, very quiet indeed, and so has his supporters. Look, he's still an MP, so he has a job to do for his constituents in Uxbridge in the west of London. But my sense of it is that he's going to get out of politics, mainstream politics, for a while, at least until the next general election. I would have thought he's got plenty of things to keep him busy. He has his books, he has his after-dinner speeches to make and make a fortune out of that all over the world. The Americans, the Ukrainians love him. When I was in Ukraine recently, I mean, Bojo was an absolute rock star. And he's got a wife and young family to look after. So I'm sure he's going to be busy, but we're not likely to see him, I think, for the foreseeable future. Rotus.
All right, well, we move onwards and forwards then. Arise chief correspondent John Cookson in Westminster. John, thank you so much for giving us the latest on Rishi Sunak's rising to the mantle of leadership at the Conservative Party, and next, of course, the United Kingdom.